Welcome back. Chapter 4. It's a mistake. You don't have to guess. It's Neil Gilfillan. I am the author. President Durbin led almost everyone who had been inside onto the south lawn. She stopped in front of a perfectly round, smooth, black, metallic ship and looked up. Its top reached the Truman balcony 60 feet above them. Indeed, many people who now stood on that balcony were treated to the sight of a brilliantly lit Washington monument rising like a speck out of the ship's skull. At the very front was a raised dugout-like protuberance, ostensibly for the ship's bridge. Blue and red lights flashed around the ship's central belt, but did not reflect off the building or trees. Only a few Secret Service agents noted this fact. It meant that whatever created the colors did not shine out like a car's headlight, but glowed from within like phosphorus. Unlike movie versions of such ships, this one did not sit atop legs. It sat on its belly like a football on the 42-yard line. Its girth covered half of the huge circular lawn's length and pressed against massive old trees on either side. Its black ass hovered over a spurting fountain ringed by small red flowers and emerald green hedges, giving the impression of a giant turtle peeing into a salad. Agents noted that no other ships had set down, nor was there any room for them to have done so, or hovered overhead. Jim asked for a quick radar check of the heavens, obeying his mentor's wise advice of procedure before knowledge, and was reassured that no objects were being picked up. This probably meant nothing, but it made him feel better nonetheless. President Durbin returned her gaze to ground level as a door lowered from the ship's center, creating a ramp, releasing a soft white light from within. The president tried very hard to stop shaking. It was a warm evening, but she felt her body shivering as if dead of winter. Rhonda felt like a scared, helpless child and didn't care for the feeling at all. She reminded herself that Rhonda Durbin was now Madam President. Her sense of reverie ended. Hope overruled fear, and President Durbin's posture straightened. Moments after she gained control, a figure appeared silhouetted within the doorway. Christ, President Durbin thought. Such an historic moment, and it's a cliché of close encounters. She restrained an impulse to close, open, and reclose her hand while whistling 5 short notes. The figure, however, was not overly tall and thin. It was her height, and looked more like Mr. Potato Head. The alien walked down the ramp and out until it stood before her. During their monitoring period, Karoslings had analyzed the language and programmed it into their translation collars. These useful collars had also become fashion accessories throughout the galaxy. This being's collar was ornamented with round white shells from something that resembled a snail. It handed a few similarly adorned collars to President Durbin, pointed at its own, and indicated she should put one on. She did, handing Broder a bunch more to pass around. "Are you what's called Prime Minister?" it asked in a nasally voice. They had been monitoring British government most of the time because the British were funny. The president cleared her throat and answered, we're not a parliamentary society, so we have no prime minister." The alien slightly inclined its head to one side. Clearly it was confused. Those behind the president looked down from side to side or tried sending a telepathic signal that more information should be given. After a moment, she added, "We are a democracy. I am the president of this democracy, which is called the United States. Welcome." Just then a light was cast upon the being from behind her. President Durbin did not have to look around to know it was Jim's flashlight. Unlike Mr. Potato Head, not a strand of hair adorned the alien's bulbous head. Lack of visible breasts gave Durbin the impression of it being male. His unadorned eyes, now shielded, were pushed closely together, and two holes beneath them served as a nose. In the flatter area below was its wide mouth, formed by full blue lips, from which it now stuck out an amazingly long blue tongue. President Durbin's upper body moved slightly backwards as she registered shock at being so rudely insulted. What she didn't know is that this was how Karosling said hello. For very good friends, the Karosling added emphasis by placing a hand to its ears and wagging the digits upward. The cop, noting the president's shocked expression, thought it might be a good idea to add the friendlier expression. President Durbin's brows drew closer together and now rose sharply. The alien didn't know for sure, but suspected something wasn't good. A low murmur rose in volume, and metallic clicks turned them into gasps. All this time monitoring them, and I'm blowing saying hello, thought the alien. How can I be so lame? He tried to salvage the situation by saying something. My name is, he started, but got no further. President Durbin felt herself being pulled back into the crowd before her brain became aware of the fact. With sudden horror, she watched the front line of agents fall to one knee. Black-suited agents behind them remained standing. All of them pointed small black objects toward the alien. It dropped its hands, withdrew its tongue, and straightened up in alarm. Then, very quickly, turned and ran. The president shouted for her agents to hold their fire, but some triggers had already slid too far back. A number of things happened almost simultaneously. One, a few bullets, released from their clips, eagerly chased the alien as he frantically dashed for safety within his ship. Two, an intense bluish-white light blasted outward from the ship's belt, slowing the bullets. It lit the night air as a supernova light lights a molecular cloud and scalded every open human eye. Those who didn't protect themselves fast enough had vision problems for over a week. Some even went blind and caused agents to shoot wildly. Many bullets bounced off the ship's sleek metal surface, not leaving a scratch, and then struck other things: ground, trees, walls, windows, and humans. President Durbin, somehow sensing something, ducked just in time to miss seeing that light. She fell to her knees, held her head down, and curled into a ball. This also helped her avoid the ricochets. And three, Jakun reached his ship. Its door noiselessly and quickly rose behind him. Once closed, night immediately reclaimed her darkened shroud around it. Madam President heard screams and moans from injured people, but the underlying sound was a deep silence. She slowly uncoiled, looked toward the placid ship, turned in a dreamlike circle to look around her, seeing many holding hands over eyes or bleeding body parts, and many sprawled out limply on the grass, until her own eyes again fell upon the ship, and she began to cry. She knew this was most unpresidential, but couldn't hold back sobs. None of this had to happen, was her first thought. Didn't they hear me order cease fire? Dear God, why? All of this over an insult? For God's sakes, Republicans insult me all the time, and they don't shoot them. But from the depth of her pain surfaced another feeling. This one was a bit odder. She thought of the moment before that ungodly light burst forth, the moment she impulsively took cover. She wasn't given to premonition, so wondered what made her do that. President Durbin recalled the impulse as being something like a sharp voice inside her head, a voice that commanded her to duck. President Durbin's next thought brought goosebumps up her spine. Had they warned me? Safely back inside his ship, Jakun slapped the hand of his pilot, Gone, for saving his life. He also praised Gone, upon being told of his exceptional effulgence, for warning the human leader. Doing so changed their options. Gone accepted Jacone's praise without telling him that his message was not a warning. Gon had intended to derisively call the leader by what he thought was the species' name. He got ducked from the trash they had picked up on the Red Planet. There was also a third Karosling present, Troll. Troll held the post of tactical defense advisor and favored wiping out the pitiful creatures. Jacune was more pragmatic. He argued that these creatures had merely reacted poorly to stress brought on by an alien visitation. Gon agreed because he was a kiss-ass. Jacune was in favor of making a further attempt to present the find, and Gon agreed, though uncertainly. Toward that goal, they proposed to wait a while. Just sit safe inside their ship and try again later. Surely the beings would react better after a period of not being annihilated. Troll reluctantly agreed that this made a degree of sense. So the alien ship sat on the south lawn. It never moved. No colored lights revolved around its rim, nor did a single noise emanate from the thing. CIA officials thought the creature may have been hit, after all, and died after getting inside. NSA thought that they were just watching to size up our capabilities. Pentagon officials wanted to bomb it because that's what they lived for. Wouldn't they have already struck? If that were their intention, the president asked her Secretary of Defense, Lucian Briggs. We can't know for sure, he quacked. So it's best to stop them from doing it before they do it. But they might not do it, President Durbin pointed out. She had taken office after running on a premise to put the concept of peace above war. Rhonda fully believed in the power of nonviolence. Toward that end, she promised to fully fund the UN and bring it back to its original undertaking, eliminating war through negotiation. She had been in office for 3 years and had made enormous strides towards her goal. She had prevented 2 outbreaks of hostilities, either one capable of becoming a long, protracted period of bloodshed. It was beginning to seem her vision was possible, and her favorable rating was an astonishing 85%. President Durbin was considered unbeatable in the coming election. But they might, Madam President. Briggs' voice remained monotone. Then where will we be? Exactly, madam. Briggs knew full well how she felt about being called madam. Moreover, she also knew he knew it. Your accomplishments for Earth will have ironically been destroyed by outer space, and you know how the universe uses irony. Rhonda Durbin had long believed justice didn't exist, but thankfully it did contain irony. President Durbin had to admit this was a possibility. It would be a shame, she reflected, to sacrifice lasting peace by failing to act on an immediate problem. But then the memory of her premonition or warning returned. She also couldn't forget that it had been 3 days since their landing, and they could probably have destroyed everyone within that time. President Durbin shook her head. We wait. I'll know when we should act, or not act. She emphasized the last words as a warning. But, Madam President, began Briggs. I said we wait, Lucian. President Durbin's rebuke came swiftly and firmly. She was well aware of his holdings in defense companies. A pause hung between them before she added in a politically softer tone, Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I know you're concerned, as are we all, but that's my decision. Now I've got another briefing to attend. Lucian Briggs rose, said, Of course, thank you, madam, and left the room. She watched him go, hoping he didn't hold the wrong position, hoping she hadn't given him the wrong position. She wondered if he was up to something. Briggs always deferred to her authority, but she got the feeling he was just playing with her like cobras do flutists. She considered having him watch for a while, but then the phone rang and derailed her thought. Yes, Julia. Chinese premiere on line 1, madam. She sighed, but not because news had apparently gotten out. Put him on, then. Secretary Briggs sank down into his brush leather office chair and thought. Durbin's stand against violence was killing his portfolio. 30 years ago, there had been a big war that promised to go on forever. Briggs was a young man then and sunk every dollar he could find into defense contractors, weapons manufacturers, and military service providers, many of them on the quiet. He made a killing from these meager dollars until suddenly, much sooner than anyone expected, the long war ended. Troops were withdrawn and all but a few contractors remained to steal whatever was left. There wasn't much. While stock dividends in military-industrial sectors never completely dried up, they had slowed to an ooze. Then the economy tanked, but many industries still did okay, especially one company that now operated from its own island, bearing a zip code used by every corporation's headquarters in North America, near Aruba. One that Briggs became a lobbyist for. Though still a young company, it developed new technologies for the military and quickly grew. Briggs had invested everything he could get his hands on into that company and quickly made his first million. More millions followed from that, and Briggs became hooked on money's allure. It's an old story of living an extravagant lifestyle. Lucian Briggs began paying a literal heavier price for his. Maintenance, repairs, and staffing all demanded he shell out large amounts of money. Fortunately, a man with his wealth paid very little taxes, or he'd have had to cut down on those expenses. Probably the maintenance, or staffing, or both. So needing a part-time job, Lucian Briggs ran for Congress. It was an interesting time. Briggs was able to help many business owners who then improved his financial condition. He had become intimate friends with many colleagues who were rather careless in their excesses. Private detectives with inside information concerning a congressman's whereabouts were able to acquire pictures. Lucian's influence began to grow, but he was also creating enemies. In one election, those animosities came to roost. Private deals were made with competing industries to ruin Briggs. News of his dirty dealings began leaking out, and Lucian handily lost. He kept many powerful friends, however, and they declared war. During the next presidential election, those friends, along with Briggs, handpicked a candidate and poured huge sums of money into his campaign. The guy only won when the Supreme Court ruled that he had, but what mattered was that he had won. Lucian ruthlessly extracted revenge from his post as chief of staff, and his CEO friends became enormously wealthy. During the next several terms of office, Briggs served in other useful positions as well, and continued to prosper. He eventually left public service for a quieter job as CEO. Aruba was a great place to live so long as you stayed away from Dutch tourists. It happened to be that a long period of domestic violence was also claiming victims around that time. Jilted lovers, fired employees, students getting poor grades and not enough attention, and other malcontents were picking up guns and killing whomever crossed their paths. While good for the gun industry, Briggs shared the view that these lunatics had grown up too privileged, never having suffered any great social threats or making sacrifices had made them goofy. Briggs thought the bastards were simply spoiled. What they needed was a good slap on the ass, and no slap stung like war. Yahoos that wanted to kill people would have an outlet, and government could exploit the talented ones by bringing them into the CIA or Black Ops. Crybabies could be made stronger, imprisoned, or brought into line through humiliation. Briggs firmly believed war was exactly what this generation needed. It would also be good for defense stocks. The trouble was finding one. Having the largest military with the scariest weapons made finding enemies who could sustain a prolonged war difficult. Further, America had to be assured of winning such a war. Another disastrous loss would only help his portfolio in the short run. His reverie ended upon remembering President Durbin. The peace-loving bitch, he thought. Briggs reflected, not for the first time, why the public elected this nut. Rhonda Durbin ran for president shortly after another vicious killing at a university. Her message of peace, along with improved medical care programs that included mental health, hit exactly the right mood, and she was swept into office by a 15% margin. Just because of one disastrous war with a long aftermath of social consequences, physically disabled or mentally ill veterans, a disastrous collapse of the economy in which dozens of CEOs took lavish packages and became university professors so they could teach their economic theories to a new generation. Poverty, homelessness, soup kitchens, and dollar stores. It all changed people's political landscape for years. Americans had become weary of armed conflicts, and that, Briggs knew, was how they elected someone like Durbin. Then something magical happened. Durbin, taking a page from President Lincoln's book, hired a member of her opposing party, Lucian Briggs, for her Secretary of Defense. Durbin felt confident that by doing so she could bridge the party gap, stop legislative blockages, and get some real work done. She also knew the defense and weapons industries would do anything possible to remove her. They were itching to regain lost power after these years of backseat treatment, and her agenda wouldn't bring them any. She needed a way to keep an eye on them, and Lucian could make a useful alarm bell. Her problem was keeping a close enough eye on him. Her answer was to use the media. President Durbin deemed her plan an acceptable risk and offered Briggs the unimaginably juicy position. Briggs jumped at it like a soon-to-be diabetic to chocolate cake, but suspected her strategy, so took measures to bury his ambitions from sight. The industrialists loved him. After becoming Secretary of Defense, Briggs learned that the Pentagon and NASA directors had long known of alien existence. The agencies often came into possession of pilot tower conversations about unidentifiable ships. NORAD had tracked strange objects on radar, and one pilot, who enjoyed amateur photography, took several very close-up pictures during a harrowing encounter. Those were made tippy-top secret and never spoken of. Astronauts had also reported and filmed close encounters during missions. Those were also kept to uppermost secrecy. While denying the inevitable proof, even to those few agency officials who had seen the photographic evidence, both agency directors privately knew extraterrestrial visitations were in fact occurring. They also determined that keeping the truth from subsequent defense secretaries and NASA directors could prove dangerous, so passed down the knowledge as privileged information reserved specifically to their positions. Such information could not be disclosed even to the president, unless needed for national defense, of course. Interestingly, the subject of abductions never panned out. They were eventually discarded as hysteria or hoaxes. Another interesting fact was that none of these sightings ever involved a Karosling ship. Karoslings had not ventured into Earth's region until Ambroise stole a police car and got stranded on Mars. But now they had landed. The proverbial cat was out of the bag. This situation presented Briggs and many others a golden opportunity. Possible possession of an actual alien ship. Imagine! What vast amounts of new things could they learn from it? Weapons research and development? Shuttles fitted with such weapons, communications, weapon sources, propulsion fuels, and navigation, to name only a few. A fleet of such shuttles would also need to be stocked with food supplies and sanitation equipment. My God, thought Briggs, stock prices would go up astronomically for so many sectors, it'd be hard not to score billions. Further, we could make even more money by picking a fight with these aliens to destroy most of our fleet and rebuild just as Orwell foresaw. Secretary Briggs almost soiled his pants. Briggs knew this was his chance to recover the old landscape. He would be solving some social ills while making defense industries even more profitable than before. He turned his mind away from contempt and began to consider weaknesses, places where he could exploit both President Durbin and that blasted ship. It took Briggs most of the remaining day, but he finally formed a plan. Carefully, Briggs felt his way around the subject with NASA Director Dennis Hutchins. This required only slight finesse because he knew the director quite well. Dennis Hutchins also held lots of stock in military-industrial corporations and held agreement that President Durbin was being naive. Director Hutchins believed the aliens wanted to establish peaceful contact now. There was no other reason for this protracted display of patience, after all. But they would use what they learned about us to invade later. He reasoned that they were probably scouting other planets for a new home. Director Hutchins' wife held star status as a real estate agent, so he knew people were always looking for new homes. Hutchins found 6 loyal agents who were then placed on permanent duty, 3 on during the day and 3 at night, among those guarding the alien ship. 1 agent on each shift carried a carefully sealed container full of fire ants to create a diversion with, if necessary. All they needed now was an opportunity. Lucian Briggs kept his ear cocked toward the door in case one knocked. See you in the next chapter.